Indycar's $1 million challenge. What a shit show. I mean, honestly, the idea was great, but the heats were boring. Turn 1 incident wasn't bad. Willpower trying to cut through the field wasn't bad either. And in Heat 2, we had McLaren's fighting at the start, but Pelot just marched to a victory. And the race wasn't that much either. You had nearly half the field driving 8 to 12 seconds just to try to save tires for the second half of the race. Well, if the last 10 laps were a lot more interesting than they were, I'd say I wouldn't really mind that, but it was only Colton Herta cutting his way through the field. If you ask me, format needs real change, a lot of change. Penske needs to start using their heads. Starting with the racing side, abolish Thermal Club. I mean, come on. Whose idea was Thermal Club? The tickets started at $2,000. We're not trying to market to rich people here. We're not a rich people series. Market to the general racing consumer. So we don't need this thermal club business. IndyCar is in need of people to see just how good the series is. We need something like a Randy Bernard or his style of thinking. Bernardism, you could call it. Really need a better name for that. Originally, one of the changes I thought of, make the $1 million challenge international. You have many choices, many different types of tracks over all across the world. You could return to former kart locations. You could go to places like Surfers Paradise, Lauritz Streets of Sao Paulo, which we raced at 10 years ago. We could return to Motegi or the Autodrome Hermanos Rodriguez, where F1 currently races the Mexican Grand Prix. Personally, I think the $1 million challenge should have a rotating track location. Specifically for 2025, a return back to the Tricky Triangle. Pocono has very good racing. We've seen it before. I mean, 2018 was great. Obviously, Wickens' crash wasn't great at all, and thank God that he was only paralyzed in that incident. But ultimately, Pocono does have very good racing. And I believe these tracks in rotation should only be there solely because of good racing. Obviously, safety should be up to standard and all. But good racing is the aspect, it's the focus. And for instance, Fakiza Raceway in South Africa is a very fun track to drive Indy cars in. There's a very competitive racing. Well, at least on a set of core support from 2007. Only problem is, well, the track's very worn down. If IndyCar were to buy the track out, there'd be a lot of renovation needed, more safety, and the track would probably have to be wider. We would also probably need something like the Hanford device. Racing gets pretty close there, and we don't want another Vegas incident. I think Daytona would also be a fun choice. I mean, Daytona infield, why would it not be fun? You see how good Rolex 24 is every year. It's one of the biggest tracks in the United States by itself. These were just three tracks I thought of, but I think more should be in the rotation and a bigger emphasis on international tracks as well. I only mentioned one international track. I think IndyCar needs to exploit the weakness of Formula One and Verstappen's domination. Show the world some very competitive open wheel racing. My next thought process, reintroduce the $5 million challenge from Vegas 2011. Yes, as we know, Vegas 2011 provides bad memories, but this challenge helped bring much more eyes onto the sport, which is what it was made to do. Try to get international guys to run one-offs in the most competitive race on the calendar, excluding the Indy 500. As for the schedule, change the date. I know it serves to shorten the gap to Long Beach. Last year, the gap to the second race was absolutely woeful. But a good way to draw in viewers is by putting it at the start of the year because people want to watch racing again. For 2025, I think the weekend of January 19th would be a very good starting point. It's a week before the Rolex 24 and the Rally Monte Carlo, so you get your foot in the door early. And for a decent amount of racing fans, that's the start of the racing year. So if you can get an IndyCar race there instead, you're you're wide open to a lot more amount of viewers. Now, everything I just mentioned would help make a good racing product, but there's two main things still missing, if you ask me. One, tire compound. Firestone needs to make the perfect tire compound for this race. A tire compound that is hard enough to last for a small series of laps, so one heat, 20 minutes, drivers pushing as hard as they can, nearly quali laps type of hard. But a tire is soft enough though that it doesn't take a really long time to get into gear. It doesn't take a long time to warm up. Finally, well, you could argue I should have said this earlier, but marketing. You gotta market the hell out of this race. Bring back the fastest, most versatile drivers moniker. I mean, imagine watching the fastest, most versatile drivers push as hard as they can for a small series of laps, battling for $1 million, and there's a driver at the back who's trying to battle for a $5 million payday. And maybe you can get some big guys like Fernando Alonso. He's driven the Indy 500 a few times before. Or someone like Kyle Larson, who's driving the Indy 500 this year, is known to drive in other types of cars, not only in NASCAR. Sure, there's not many drivers nowadays that try to drive in different machinery, but I'm sure you can get someone. Maybe you could get someone like a Lewis Hamilton even. He's expressed interest in driving an IndyCar before, although he did say he'd rather drive in a car that doesn't have an aero screen. Also, obviously, put the race on NBC. Don't put it on Peacock. Put race, quali, NBC. Please. We need as many views as we can get. As for the format, obviously the format needs a lot of changing. Who am I kidding? I won't touch the practice part. I don't mind the practice part at all. So, yeah. I mean, if they wanted to tweak it, I wouldn't mind, depending on how it is first time and under this new format. So, think qualifying wasn't that bad. There's some stuff I'd keep, some stuff I wouldn't. Push to pass being available is great, but I'd split it into 20 seconds for a 3.5 mile track like Daytona, which is a bit of my basis for this. This forces you to maximize your uses. I mean, Daytona, 3.5 miles is big, but you only have 20 seconds. So you got to maximize each second you use of this push to pass. Get Firestone to make a really soft tire compound. Push for only one lap. Only one push lap. And gives the teams 4 sets each for qualifying. Within an 8-minute qualifying session, which currently has, and I don't mind it either. I think this should be an ample set of tires. Random draw will be retained. This was a 2-group format. A random draw for quali and the heat placement, for qualies when you split the groups up. But for the heats, you take these 2 groups after they qualified, put them into 2 heats, use their qualifying position as the position for the heats. It's pretty self-explanatory. Top half of both heats go through. So, for instance, 13 cars per heat, top 6 will go through. And the cars that will qualify for the final race will be random place, unless the $5 million challenge winner, well, he hasn't won yet, but $5 million challenge driver makes it through. He's automatically starting last. So the heat will be 20 minutes, not including cautions, keeping that, altering it a little bit. Just 20 minutes of green flag racing. And the final race will be 40 minutes, not including cautions as well. There will be a competition caution, however, halfway through the race so the drivers can pit. This is a bit gimmicky, but we're trying to invent an interesting race here. The winner of the heat will take the $1 million purse or the $5 million challenge if they were the driver and they won it. Speaking of the $5 million challenge, if this was abolished after next year's race, I wouldn't mind because you could argue it will start to lose a bit of its magic, but I think it's a pretty good tool. If they implement something that was similar, I wouldn't mind that at all. Now, let me know what you think of this idea. Give me some critiques or compliments. Now, IndyCar, will you seize the $1 million moment?